I think that growth has outperformed for so long at this point that it seems unlikely to me that it just kind of can't do it forever. Also, it's worth noting that even when growth does work for a long time, it's often different companies, because companies go through these phases of huge growth and then they become mature companies, and you might then be swapping them out for new high growth companies. But I just feel that really over the last kind of 15, 20 years, there's been almost no performance in value investing. And it seems to me that if you're a little bit nervous that markets seem toppy or expensive, rather than going to cash, I'd say, maybe take on, some of these value stocks that haven't performed. And thus, if a bubble bursts, they shouldn't necessarily burst because they were never inflated to begin with. But really, since the credit crunch, all of the growth has kind of come from what they, now we call the Magnificent Seven. There used to be the FANG stocks. But if you look at, European or British stocks, they really haven't done much since the credit crunch. Most American stocks have not done much since the credit crunch. And it's been this sort of handful of tech stocks. And I would think that going forward, it's probably likely that we see a resurgence in maybe some of the overlooked sectors.
Do you think rates are a big factor in that? Interest rates, as in
yeah,
discount
I mean, it's
cash flow?
huge, because one of the reasons, also these tech firms have, because rates were low, they had a ton of money thrown at them and they were able to do stuff with that. So that's a positive. But then on the other hand, when you have a company where all of its earnings are kind of 10 or 20 years out in the future, when $1 in 20 years' time is worth $1 today, which is what you get in a zero interest rate environment, well, that's a very valuable company. When you start discounting things at, 5% a year, even right now, there's very much that feeling that people are still saying, like, when will rates go down to normal? And look at a 100-year chart of interest rates. Like, we're not high at the moment, and so should rates stay higher for longer, a lot of these sort of less, I don't know, there's some of the Silicon Valley companies that, like, these Uber type, I made a video called Blitzscaling that looks at companies that essentially aim to grow and not really worry about
making money.
And when you look at that kind of a business, like, it's a very unusual environment we've been in when that has sort of been the stuff to invest in over the last 20 years. And it slightly entertains me when, you'll see these sort of Silicon Valley thought leaders, and they'll say, I'll give you business advice as to how to, become very wealthy and blah, blah, blah. And they're advising you to start up a business that requires huge amounts of capital, that generates no return on investment. You know what I mean? Like it just, the stock price goes up. But for most people, like, if you want to start a business with your own money, you probably want some sort of return. Yeah. You want it to pay you. Yeah.
This was such a great interview. I loved meeting Patrick, and we talked about so much more. Click here if you want to watch the full interview.